Hi, everyone. My name is David Macklin. I am going to be talking today about obesity as a real disease. I'm a family physician. I've been working in the field of obesity medicine for over 20 years. The concept of obesity as a real disease starts with the concepts of the disease itself, the genetic vulnerabilities that individuals with obesity struggle with, the nature of the disease as a brain-centered real medical condition, the fact that it is a progressive condition, and the fact that it is a very strongly environmentally influenced real medical disease. So let me go through these elements, and at the end you tell me if this is something that really sounds like a real disease rather than just a lifestyle choice by someone living with obesity. Starting with genetics, you might be surprised to learn that somewhere around 70% of someone's risk of struggling with weight in their lifetime is conferred genetically. These numbers come from well-validated twin studies comparing identical and fraternal twins, those raised in the same environment, those raised in different environments. We also have, through genome-wide association studies, evidence of a very strong genetic or heritability to BMI and to those living with obesity. You might also be surprised to learn that of all of these genes, the absolute great majority of them are in the central nervous system. We all inherit a three-layered appetite system, and this is where our weight is regulated. This is where our metabolism is determined. This is where cravings, appetite, this is where our brain's response to lost adiposity as individuals lose fat. And the brain is expert at recognizing fat loss and fighting against it with increased appetite to defend against fat loss. It does this because if our ancestors lost weight, it was never to look good for a wedding or because of bathing suit season, but primarily because of illness, but also because of a potential interrupted food supply. And so the majority of the genes are in the central nervous system, three-layer appetite system. There is a executive system at the top in an area defined as the prefrontal cortex. There's a middle layer, which is the hedonic or reward or motivation system of the brain. This is where the strong drives and motivations to food occur, the motivation to do the work to find food. And finally, the third layer, which is called the homeostatic layer. And this is where primarily fat loss is recognized and defended against, and where signals of fullness and hunger come from our body, signaled through nerves and through hormones. The next concept that suggests that obesity is a real disease is the progressive nature of the condition. There's a concept where, and the science is still being worked out, where there is a concept of either a set point or a settling point, or where the genes drift up to a highest point over time that determines differences in the vulnerability of an individual to struggle with weight and gain weight. It's best described, I think, by John Speakman in his description of each individual human having a upper intervention point, the point of adiposity that they collect in their body when their brain actually shuts down appetite and slows and stops weight gain. And this has been shown to be a variable trait where individuals have these distinct differences in at what weight gain their brain stops them from gaining any more weight. And then finally, and that we consider that a progressive condition. And by the way, the appetite piece itself, the conditioning that takes place through our lifetime between our modern food environment and our brain creates a sensitization or a conditioning where every exposure to the foods that are in our obesogenic environment continually sensitize and make the human brain in subcortical areas more and more responsive to cues that generate wanting and drive and motivation to food. And so the more times there's associations between these foods in our brain, the stronger the sensitization and the stronger the drives and motivations to food. It's one of the reasons we consider obesity to be a progressive condition. And then finally, strongly environmentally influenced. The prevailing understanding as to why obesity is something now is because of a collision between what I've described as this ancient brain built for a time when calories were scarce and work was required for calorie acquisition, a collision between that brain and our modern food environment, our modern obesogenic food environment. And it's that collision in those who are genetically vulnerable that makes it very logical that those individuals will, in this environment, struggle with their weight and weight gain and be at risk of living with obesity. So, would you consider genetic, central nervous system, progressive, environmentally influenced real medical condition? Then it allows us, and this won't be the focus of my talk, to invite individuals to consider that their struggle with weight is not their fault, and instead them living with a real disease that is simply untreated. And the final point is that, of course, we're now in an advanced stage where we have very effective treatment pillars to obesity. We have the pillar of behavioral therapy, the pillar of medication or medical therapy, and the pillar of surgical therapy, all very effective methods of treating obesity. And so why is it important that we speak about obesity as a real disease? It's not the focus of this talk, but it's because individuals who live with obesity have internalized over time blame and shame regarding their weight, feeling that somehow it's their responsibility and their fault and something that they're just not doing enough for. And they internalize the stigma and bias and internalized discrimination. And so it becomes even more important to communicate to these individuals an invitation to consider that obesity is a real disease, genetically conferred, progressive, central nervous system based, environmentally influenced, and not their fault, and something for which treatment exists. Thanks for listening.